The TV series Evil is based on real events. 16-year-old Eric Ponte severely beats up some guy. For this incident, he is expelled from school, about which the other students whisper. His mother Karen comes for Eric and says that his son will be sent to the Stearnsburg boarding school away from home, where no one knows him. Eric travels to boarding school by train, and along the way he looks with interest at a pretty blonde fellow traveler who gets off at the same station. Eric takes a taxi to the boarding school, where Principal Stearnsburg explains the ground rules, knowing full well that the new student is a bully. The peculiarity of the boarding school is that its leaders gave all power to the senior students. Then Eric meets Otto and Bernhard near the senior students' dormitory, which is called Olympus. Bernhard gives him a tour of the grounds, showing him the dorm and the stadium. After changing into his school uniform, Eric goes down to the cafeteria for dinner, where he notices a pretty girl he met on the train. Her name is Maria and she works in the kitchen. The new student witnesses Otto punishing another first-year student, Johann, for knocking over a glass and hits him hard in the head with the handle of a knife. In the evening, Eric calls home to report that he arrived without incident. Karen talks to her son secretly from her evil husband Oak. In the dorm room, Eric meets his neighbor Pierre. Pierre helps a new student sew on a badge, simultaneously explaining about the humiliating rules of the boarding school, which must be followed impeccably. For example, if a senior student punishes you, then you cannot answer him. Because of this, first-year students can even be expelled from the boarding school. At this moment, senior students break into the room with an inspection and carefully examine all the things. Otto finds a cigarette under the mattress, but since Eric and Pierre will not admit who it belongs to, the senior student tells them both to come to the school council tomorrow. Before going to bed, Eric remembers his home and the bullying of his cruel stepfather Oak, who severely beat him on his bare back with a dog leash for any offense. In the morning during class, Eric sees through the window how a senior student beats Johann. Eric can't get this out of his head, even when he and Pierre hide in the forest while jogging to smoke. Later they meet girls on a horseback ride, including blonde Maria. The girl warns that cigarette smoke can be seen from afar. Pierre reminds his roommate that it is forbidden to start relationships with boarding school employees. Before dinner, the senior students report that Johann complained about the beatings to his mother, and she complained to the director. But in a boarding school, students sort things out themselves. Otto places a glove in front of the guilty Johann, challenging him to a duel. This is the only option in which you can fight back, but this is unlikely to help, since Otto is too strong. At the school board meeting, Eric continues to claim that the cigarette in the room did not belong to him. He accuses Otto that the senior student set him up, but the council, led by Bernhard, does not want to listen to anything and punishes Eric with deprivation of his days off. After calling his mother, Eric goes with the rest of the students to watch the duel. Otto easily beats up Johann to the cheers of the other seniors. Not wanting to watch this mockery, Eric goes for a run. Maria notices this. Later it becomes known that Johann refused to continue studying at the boarding school and went home. On the weekend, Pierre is taken home by his father. Eric accompanies him, but he himself stays at the boarding school. While jogging, he stops near the place where the duel took place. There are bloodstains there. Eric then goes to the school pool. Otto is practicing there, who says that only members of the school swim team and seniors have access to the pool. Eric wants to join the swim team, but he is too young to do so. Otto does not like the arrogant behavior of the new student. He convinces the rest of the student council that Eric needs to be punished as a lesson to the others. In the library, Eric talks to Maria, who is preparing to go to college so that she will not have to work as a cook all her life. The girl warns that students can be expelled for talking to the staff, so they need to be careful. They agree to meet at a dance in the evening. Otto calls Eric to Olympus. The senior student tries to provoke the new student, but he remains calm and confident, which irritates Otto even more. The senior student assigns additional punishment and orders him to report to the stadium at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. While waiting for the seniors, Eric talks to the swimming coach Toss, who suggests that he join the swim team. In a few weeks, there will be a championship between private schools. Soon Otto and his friends show up and tell Eric to dig a deep hole. While Otto and his friends entertain themselves with a game of pool and alcohol, Eric perseveres for hours digging the hole. Then he remembers how his stepfather once again punished him for setting a personal record in swimming, and his mother, in order not to hear the sounds of blows, played the piano at that time. In the evening, Otto and his friends return to check the result and tell Eric to bury the hole. Taking a shovel, Eric sends the senior student into this very hole with a precise blow to the head. But this is just a student's fantasy. Containing his anger, Eric gets to work. At the dance, Maria can't wait for Eric and has to leave because the senior Leffler annoys her with his constant flirting. On Monday, students return to the boarding school. School council chairman Bernhard is late for breakfast. Approaching Eric and seeing his dirty hands, he learns that the new student was forced to dig a hole, although labor punishment from the student council in the absence of the chairman is a violation of the rules. For lack of hygiene, the vengeful Otto orders Eric to get up and hits him hard on the head, using the pointed stopper from the decanter. Eric calmly withstands the blow and does not make a sound, despite the blood flowing. It is only when Toss takes him to the nurse that Eric nearly falls to the ground in severe pain. Bernhard reprimands Otto not to bring his personal grudge against Eric into the work of the school council. In the medical office, the coach says that Eric can prove his superiority over the older students in sports and invites him to join the swim team. The coach also notices the scars on the new student's back and realizes that he has had a difficult life. Later at the stadium, Eric explains to Maria why he couldn't come to the dance. After the conversation, Eric goes to Toss to sign up for the swim team. However, upon returning to the room, he finds a glove on the bed. This is a challenge to a duel from Otto. Eric knows that he can easily beat up an arrogant rich senior student, but then he might be expelled from the boarding school, and his cruel stepfather will obviously be very angry from such a shame. So on the street, Eric just endures all the blows, but does not ask for mercy. At this moment, Eric remembers his past, when he and his friends stole things from stores. One day, his mother sent Eric to his stepfather's workplace at a restaurant to hand over some forgotten cufflinks. There, Eric accidentally collided with the waiter and broke the plates, for which the restaurant administrator reprimanded Oak, publicly humiliating him. Eric understood perfectly well that at home his stepfather would take out his anger on him. Because of his visit to the restaurant, he was late for a meeting with friends who were looking for the debtor to force him to repay the debt. They find the debtor in the cinema and again demand that he repay the debt, and Eric threatens to beat him severely if he refuses. The debtor promises to return everything soon, after which Eric goes home. There his aggressive stepfather is already waiting for him, who this time is going to use a metal shoehorn instead of a dog leash. After his stepfather's harsh punishments, Eric got used to enduring pain, so now he is not afraid of Otto's blows. The new student receives blow after blow, but each time he gets back on his feet. Eric again remembers that while he was swimming in the pool, his friends were caught by the police during another robbery attempt. One of Eric's friends turned him into the police as the leader of their gang, after which the school principal calls Eric to his office and declares that either he will graduate from school without incident or he will go to prison. Leaving the school principal's office, Eric sees that his friends have again caught the debtor and are again demanding money from him, although he has already repaid the entire debt. Eric doesn't like this at all and invites the most impudent of his friends, who decided to encroach on the role of leader of their gang, to fight for the place of leader. This friend not only refuses to fight, but also pees his pants out of fear. Eric declares that he is tired of the gang and leaves, just like the rest of his friends, leaving the disgraced guy alone. Quitting crime, Eric decides to focus on improving his swimming performance. But at home he learns that everyone already knows about the gang, including his evil stepfather. Oak invites his stepson to choose what he will be punished with today. Eric can't stand it and starts screaming that his stepfather is an evil sadist who will never change, and he despises his pathetic, insignificant nature. Surprised by Eric's insolence, Oak grabs his stepson's favorite dog and a shotgun, then goes outside. Eric runs after him and begs to let the dog go, but Oak doesn't listen to anything and kills the unfortunate pet with a shot. Eric spends the night crying on the street next to the body of his dead dog. Soon, Eric approaches the former friend who turned him in to the police and beats him in front of numerous eyewitnesses. It was because of this incident that Eric was transferred to a boarding school. Back in the present, Eric still refuses to apologize to Otto, despite his bloody face. Instead, he warns that the senior has the option to leave or he will break his bones. However, Otto does not leave. Then Eric sends his opponent to the ground with several blows, after which he finishes him off with his feet. Maria sees this and leaves here in shock, but Eric still delivers a powerful finishing blow to the face of the impudent Otto. Afterwards, the nurse takes Otto by taxi to the hospital while Eric gets stitches in the nurse's office. In the morning at breakfast, the teachers discuss what happened, Some want to expel Eric immediately, others believe that he did everything in accordance with the school rules. Eric himself is already packing his things, confident that he will be expelled, despite Pierre's approving words. What worries Eric most of all is what Maria thinks of him now. Loeffler comes to the hospital to Otto and reports that Eric has not been expelled. Moreover, Bernhard even stood up for him when other senior students began to threaten the new student. Bernhard is sure that if Eric is punished, then they will all also get punished for arbitrariness. Pierre tries to convince Eric to compete in the swimming championship in order to change the current situation at the boarding school. However, Eric is more worried that Maria began to avoid him after the fight. Eric waits for Maria near the kitchen, and she unexpectedly tells him that she is going to quit, despite the guy's requests not to do so. In the evening, while Maria is writing her resignation letter, Eric tells Pierre about his cruel stepfather. At this time, first-year students on the street are training to fight like him, repeating the techniques they saw during the duel. Noticing this, Bernhard asks the director to expel Eric from the boarding school in the morning, while the rest of the senior students grudgingly discuss the consequences of the duel. At this moment, the coach takes Eric into the locker room to confront the rest of the students with the fact he replaced Otto with Eric on the swim team. The director tells Eric to come see him after practice. One of the members of the board of trustees, Otto's father, who generously sponsors the boarding school, arrives at the boarding school. He insists that Eric, who beat up his son, cannot be expelled. This will have a bad impact on the reputation of the entire boarding school. Instead, the vertical of power among students in the school itself should be strengthened. Eric gets off with only a verbal warning. He calls his mother, but she says that it is better for them not to communicate temporarily. Oak realized that she was secretly in contact with her son and beat her severely. In the absence of his stepson, his anger spills over to his wife, which is noticed by her friends. One of them offers to leave her abusive husband because she is always welcome at her old job and she will be able to earn money on her own. Maria is about to quit, but receives a letter that makes her change her mind. She sends all the money she has saved home. At lunch, the first-year students begin chanting Eric's last name, Ponty, and stomping their feet, showing their disobedience to the seniors. Only Otto's appearance silences them. After the prayer, he announces that he is replacing Bernhard at the head of the school council, and now he himself will carefully monitor discipline. As a show of power, he forces one of the students to punish Pierre for smoking a cigarette. From the blow, Pierre falls to the floor with a bloody head. Eric jumps up from his seat, but remembers the chain of command and sits back down. Lunch continues as if nothing had happened. The further situation at school becomes even more depressing. Fearing to threaten Eric personally, Otto takes revenge on him by bullying his friend Pierre. The spring championship between private schools begins soon. Participants gather in Sternsburg. Otto is not happy that Eric is on the list of participants, causing him to bully Pierre even more. Eric understands that Pierre will not stand it for long, but the coach convinces him not to interfere. Meanwhile, Loeffler warns Pierre that if Eric wins, Pierre will suffer seriously because of this. In a relay race, Eric is the last to enter the race, plus the passing participant drops his baton. However, thanks to his excellent physical shape, Eric catches up with his rivals and finishes almost simultaneously with the leader. Pierre is sure that his friend gave in on purpose and asks him to win next time for sure. Inspired, Eric goes to the pool for a swimming competition. An additional incentive is given by the fact that Maria and her friend also came to watch the swim. Only Otto is extremely dissatisfied when he sees Eric. The start signal sounds and the swimmers dive into the water. After the first segment, Eric and Otto take the lead, and the main fight ensues between them. But still, Eric finishes first, taking away his title from the current champion. Swimming closer, Otto quietly whispers to the winner that Pierre is now finished. While Eric stands on the podium with the gold medal, Otto and his friends leave the spectator stands. Concerned about Pierre's absence, the new champion goes looking for him and finds his friend in the medical unit with a broken face. Pierre congratulates him on his victory and asks him not to miss the competition for his sake. A little later, one of the kitchen workers promises Eric that she will give food to Pierre. After lunch, Eric is waiting for her, but Maria comes instead. Maria tells her story. Her brother was regularly beaten by teenagers from a neighboring farm, until one day he could not stand it and jumped off the roof. The brother survived, but remained disabled. Maria needs money to take care of him. Because of this, she hates bullies and brawlers, and this boarding school is literally saturated with the spirit of violence. In the end, Maria accuses Eric of making people close to him suffer all the time and leaves. The upset guy calls home, but his stepfather answers the phone. It turns out that Karen left her cruel husband, leaving him only a farewell letter. Oak begins to threaten his stepson, but Eric snaps back before hanging up. Enraged, Oak goes berserk and breaks the piano. Returning to the room, Eric sees that Pierre's bed is empty. Eric finds his friend's farewell letter, but Pierre himself is already on the train home. With this letter, Eric goes to Olympus to finally deal with Otto. The senior student is not there, so Eric rushes at Leffler, but Otto, who has sneaked up behind him, knocks out the first-year student. Eric wakes up in the middle of the forest. His arms and legs are tied to stakes sticking out of the ground. Otto looms over him, and then the senior students bring in a crowd of first-year students with buckets in their hands. Eric reminds them that they have the right to refuse and leave because there are more of them. But the intimidated first-year students prefer to obey. They pour water on Eric, including boiling water. Bernard stands up for him for a moment, but under the oppression of the others, he also joins in the massacre. This continues until everyone present has poured out the water, after which they return to the dorm, leaving Eric on the damp ground. Fortunately, Maria finds the wounded Eric in time, unties his arms and legs, and carries him to the pool to warm him up, simultaneously noticing his deep scars on his back. Eric soon comes to his senses and tells Maria that the scars on his back were left by his cruel stepfather. Despite the pain from their wounds, Eric and Maria spend an unforgettable night together in bed and enjoy each other. In the morning, Maria returns to her room, but the housekeeper is already waiting for her there. Eric goes to the medical unit, where he calls home. There, his mother's friend and a criminologist are examining the mess that Oak created. The woman gives a phone number where he can contact his mother and says that Karen is going to divorce Oak. In response, Eric admits that he is dating a beautiful girl, unaware that Maria has already been fired. Maria left, having previously convinced the housekeeper not to tell the director of the boarding school about her prohibited relationship with Eric. The nurse, having prescribed Eric an ointment, advises him to contact the director of the boarding school because of the torture, but the guy doubts that this will help. Eric comes to dinner, where he breaks the rule of silence, but none of the senior students dare to object to him. A little later, the kitchen worker tells Eric that Maria was fired because of their prohibited relationship. Now Eric must finish school for her sake, then the girl's sacrifice will not be in vain. Heartbroken, he continues to study and play sports. The older students have stopped bullying him and are completely ignoring him. One day in the room, Eric finds on the bed an open letter from Maria, in which she offers to meet when he successfully passes his final exams. He goes outside to read it in peace and quiet, and when he returns, the director of the boarding school is already waiting for him in the room. The director expels a student due to a violation of the rules, a prohibited relationship with a kitchen worker. Eric says that reading other people's letters is also prohibited, but it turns out that Otto did it. After thinking a little, Eric goes to the stables, where Otto is preparing for a horse ride. Eric angrily says that it is dangerous to be here alone, otherwise some accident will happen to a student and the stable will have to be closed. Frightened, Otto rushes for the stirrups, but Eric manages to grab them first. Eric swings at the senior student, forcing him to cower in fear and beg for mercy. Without throwing a punch, Eric leaves. He calls his mother to take him home. In the evening, the woman arrives, not alone, but with a work colleague, a practicing lawyer. Before picking up Eric, they talk with the director of the boarding school, who agreed to accept them, despite the late hour. The director explains that he expelled the student on the basis of the school's rules. The guests take out the criminal code, which contains an article on the secrecy of correspondence. The woman asks to remember on what basis her son was expelled. The director understands that because of what happened, big troubles may await him, and as a result, Otto is expelled from the boarding school. The school board under his leadership is reprimanded. After this, Pierre is happy to return to his studies. Bernhard announces at lunch that before the end of the semester a new charter will be presented, taking into account the interests of students of all courses. The first-year students greet the speech with applause, chanting Pawnee's name, but he himself is not among them. Eric is going home. After taking photos of the scars on his back, he and his mother use them to the police as evidence against his stepfather. Oak is arrested on the job, and Eric watches as he is put into a police car. Eric returns to boarding school, successfully completes his studies, and receives a diploma. Then he goes to Helsinki, where Maria now lives. They go to meet each other, smiling joyfully, and this is where the story ends.